In life, we all encounter obstacles, and those obstacles come in all different shapes, sizes, and forms. The question is, how do we handle those obstacles? Do we attack them head on, or do we allow them to make us quit? Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast, where we aim to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up on themselves, their dreams, or their goals. We will interview successful people from all walks of life as they share their no-quit stories when they had the choice to give up or give in, but they didn't. We thank you for listening, and we hope to be that jolt of positivity as you go for your greatness. Welcome to episode number 128 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is giving. Our quote of the day comes to us from Winston Churchill. We make a living by what we get. We make a life by what we give. As we continue with our Pay It Forward theme, I'm very excited to bring you today's episode. When it comes to giving, that is an area that John Ruhlin completely understands. In today's episode, the author of the incredible book, Giftology, digs deep into the importance of what it really means to give a gift to someone and to truly thank them the right way. I hope you enjoy today's episode. John, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Chris.
I appreciate it. So the first question we ask everybody is, are you ready to bring it today?
Dude, I just got done with a 2.5 mile walk on the beach. So I'm feeling pretty energized, dude.
All right, well, you win. I had a 2-hour workout in the gym, but you being on the beach, you win.
Well, this is a bucket list item for my wife. She wanted to spend a month at the beach, so my wife and 3 girls are here in North Carolina, and so I walked to the nearest hotel so I could get some good Wi-Fi, and I'm ready to bring it.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it. So in life, we all encounter obstacles, and I was wondering if you have either a personal story of perseverance or perhaps a challenging time that really tested you and you could have given up or given in, but you didn't.
Yeah, I would say that it happened about 10 years ago. Well, I've had plenty. I think I could give you probably 10 different obstacles or major things or times I wanted to quit, but probably the biggest one, I sold half the business thinking it was to grow it, and in the course of about 6 months, everything that could go wrong for an entrepreneur went wrong for me. When I sold half the business, my business partner started looking into our finances and started asking me about these charges, and I realized the person who I'd started, when I was with Cutco, I hired for 5 hours a week, then became my CPA and my right-hand person. I found out that she was stealing from me. And so all of our employees worked virtually, so we showed up to her house with a U-Haul truck and basically cleaned out her entire house of the computers, and 5'1" was there, and I thought he was going to kill me. He's like 330 pounds. It was just it was like one of the worst days of my life. I'm crying, she's crying. I mean, it was just horrible. And then a couple months later, my girlfriend, who had just moved to Ohio, I'm back in her hometown and back in Southern Illinois, and I get 4 phone calls in a row real late at night, and it was my mom, and she was hysterical, and I couldn't understand what she was saying, and finally, she just kept saying Xander, and I was like, that's my 18-month-old nephew. Why is she talking about Xander? And come to find out, when she finally calmed down, he had drowned. And I don't know if you've ever been to a kid's funeral before, especially somebody that you love, but I went back. I drove 12 hours through the night with my girlfriend, and spent a week there, and it was like one of the more surreal, depressing. I ended up coming back, resigning from being a consultant. I was doing some business consulting with Cutco, and looked through the mail a couple days later and got the envelope, and nobody wants to get it. It was the IRS audit, because all my taxes for many, many years have been done wrong because of the person who was my right-hand person stealing from me. And then 2007, 2008, all the meltdown, the financial meltdown happened, and I had invested in multiple businesses and real estate, and I went from living on, pretty good income to literally taking after tax $1,000 a month was my take home. And my business partner, who just bought the business, half the business, took 0 withdrawals for 2 years. So I talk about these, hanging on by the skin of my teeth. I refused to go bankrupt. I just really had to decide, do I want to just turn it all in and start over, or go, get a real job, or am I going to figure out a way to make this work? And so for the next 2-3 years, we just hustled and went after it, paid all the debts back, didn't go bankrupt, and came out on the other end way stronger. But there were a number of dark days during that was like, why is it, is this even worth it? Should I just give it all up and like just cash out? I mean, I was at negative net worth by a lot, but it was one of the more painful times. But looking back, it's now, I'm able to draw strength from that. So that's probably one of the worst times for me.
Wow, I totally appreciate you sharing that. I knew a little bit of some of your backstory. I guess a follow-up question to that is, during those tough times, what was it that kept you going? Was it family? Was it things you were reading? Was it stuff that you were doing? But what kept you going? And I know that there's nothing wrong with money and being in debt and things like that. So many people do it. But I guess, just how did you keep going during those tough and 3 years, like you said, hustling and grinding?
I think it was a combination of things. I mean, I think something that's been always super important to me is my faith. So, there's a lot of times spent on my knees, praying to God and reading the good book and talking to Jesus. It brings you to, it's kind of like there's no atheist in the foxhole, like when you're in pain and you don't really have the answers, like it's, for me, the faith was big. I would say that I wouldn't have survived had it not been for my business partner, Rod, who bought half the business. He was able to steady the ship and say, John, go focus on relationships and sales, and I'll clean up the mess on the back end if you can go just focus there. And so he became one of the rocks of the business. Like like I said, I thought selling the business to him was to grow it, and really it ended up being to save it. And so that having the right people around me, and I think that I just got focused on trying to take care of myself at the same time. I would say one of the bad things I did was I focused so much I didn't take care of my relationships, and so it started off the relationship with my now wife really rough. And so I wish I could go back and do some things differently, because I completely neglected her for a number of years. But yeah, I would say faith and having the right people around me allowed me to get through it.
I'm so glad that you touched on the right people. One of the things that we've been talking about on our show since January and February this year is the importance of having the right people in your corner and on your bus. And I think that's something that not just entrepreneur, but anybody, you can be an employee, you can be a boss, you could be a student, you could be a parent, a grandparent. It's so important that you have the right people that are in your corner and really on your bus. So I'm glad you touched on that. Wanted to ask you, John, if you could just briefly tell our listeners a little bit about who you are for those that don't know exactly what you're doing now and today.
Yeah. Well, I was a farm boy, Ohio, poor, one of 6 kids, milking goats before I went to school. I was that kind of poor farm kid, wanting to get out of Dodge, our town. I looked the other day at the census report. It's 355 people in the town I grew up in. So wanted to go be a doctor to make my mom proud, and she was into health and wellness. And went to go intern for Cutco, the company that's worked with 1.5 million college kids. And really just, I was desperate. I needed money. I didn't want to go to med school with $250,000 in debt or more. And so I thought maybe it'll last a couple summers if I'm lucky. And my life really changed because I was dating a girl at the time. Her dad was an attorney, and he was a rainmaker, like referrals coming out of his ears, like every deal in town came his way. And I also noticed when you're poor, you notice when people are really generous. He was radically generous, like crazy. Like he'd find deals on noodles. Everybody at church the next Sunday would end up with like 20 cases of noodles. And I'm like, Paul, that's 20 grand. Why would you do that? And he's like, did you see their smiles? I'm like, yeah, of course they're going to smile. Like, you just gave them a year's supply of noodles. He's like, that's just who I am. So I pitched him an idea of giving away pocket knives. I thought all of his clients are CEOs of like banks and oil companies and insurance companies, financial advisors. And he changed my life forever when he was like, John, can I order paring knives engraved? I'm like, Paul, I'll sell you as many paring knives as you want. I'm desperate, obviously, but why? And he said, John, the reason I have more referrals and deal flow and growth than I could ever handle is that I found out in 40 years in business that if you take care of the family, everything else seems to take care of itself. So for me, it was like that lightning bolt moment. I realized it wasn't about the knife, although the knives are amazing. We still to this day sell millions of dollars of knives. It was about understanding reciprocity and influence and making investments in people with no strings attached. And so I realized like this is a genius move that I don't see other businesses doing it. So I started to invest, I'd invest $200 in a carving set as a college kid, which is a lot of money. And I would be targeting to get a meeting with like a $200 million CEO of an insurance company. And I would engrave his name, his wife's name, family name, and I'd put a little handwritten note inside that said, "Carve out 5 minutes for me. I promise it'll be worth your time." And I would, 2 weeks later, I'd get a call from his assistant saying he wants to take the meeting. And I'd walk in, I'd be skipping class to take this meeting. I'd wear the one suit I had on, and I'd walk into this big mahogany boardroom. And you could tell the CEO's in his 60s is bewildered. He's like, "I thought you'd be in your 50s. Are you John Ruhlin?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "You sent me that amazing gift." I'm like, "Yeah." He said, "I'm confused. Are you here to sell me knives?" I'm like, "No, I'm here to help you and your 1,000 sales reps do exactly what I did to you, to your top 10,000 relationships." And I would walk out of the meeting with a PO for 1,000 knife sets, and Cutco thought it was fraud because they're like, "No insurance company's buying 1,000 knife sets. That's retarded. Like, no way." And I'm like, "No, it's for real. Here's how we're using gifting and gratitude as this competitive advantage to drive referrals and retention and open doors." And finally, we ended up, I put med school on the side and I started a company. And so for the last 18 years, I've been helping companies from $500,000 entrepreneurs to $20 billion Fortune 100 companies do exactly that. Use gifting and gratitude, help them outsource all of their gifting to us, and show them how to drive referrals, drive retention, 10x their business, using what most people consider an afterthought, which is gifting. And so we've really built a business around that entire concept.
I love that, and something you just said is near and dear to us. Is we've taken a concept calling paying it forward with zero strings attached and with zero expectations, and obviously you just touched on that as well. So because you've talked about the gifting concept, I have to tell you, your book Giftology is amazing. I've gifted it to probably 10 to 15 people, and I know probably 6 or 7 people within my circle and a couple people in my mastermind that have actually bought the audiobook. So I just have to tell you, I think the concept is amazing. Before we jump into the book, I know you and I spoke offline, and you do have something that you share is the worst gift. So I was wondering if you could just spend a second and touch on that, because I think it's really good in some ways, because a lot of people think that they're doing something for somebody, but if maybe any of our listeners are in the entrepreneur world or maybe in-laws or something, maybe you can share some of the worst gifts so maybe they can at least stay away from those as well.
Yeah. I think most people are motivated oftentimes by pain more than they are towards pleasure. And so one of the exercises we walk our clients through is, hey, whether you hire us to do your gifting or not, like, here's the things you need to avoid doing. Show it to your marketing team, your sales team. And when people see the list, they're like, "Oh my gosh, how did you know? That's our entire playbook. That's exactly what we give." And so some of the things that are on there, like gift cards, and people are like, "What's wrong with a gift card?" They can go pick out the gift themselves. And I'm like, you're telling the other person that they're not valuable enough for you to go take the time and thoughtfulness to go pick something out for you. So it shows that you're lazy. It shows that you're not thoughtful. It shows that they're not valuable. And you're putting money on a piece of plastic. Like, it's just not, the purpose of a gift, we call it artifacts, is to deepen the value of the relationship, to create an emotional connection and hopefully a tangible trigger that every time they use the item, they're reminded of the relationship and you stay top of mind. You give them a gift card, most of the time the gift card's flossed, it's forgotten about. And at best, it's still like you're not emotionally bought into the person. And so gift cards are on that list. Food. People are like, "Well, what's wrong with food? Everybody likes food." And I'm like, well, first off, besides the point that like people are on keto diets and paleo diets and gluten-free, and like if they're Jewish, they're not eating pork. Like, you can offend people with food, and the third one is beverages, alcohol. Like, what's wrong with alcohol? And I'm like, well, here's the biggest things is every part of your business you mention or you measure things like the cost per impression. Like in marketing, whether it's a billboard or a Facebook ad, what's it cost per lead, cost per impression? Well, you send a $50 bottle of wine, you think you're doing a great thing. They think about you once for 30 minutes, and so you spent $50 to get one impression. The reason the knives have worked so well, and a lot of the things that we do that last for decades, is I give somebody a $200 knife. That's a lot of money, but they'll think about me once a day for the next 20 years. Let's just say 10 years. That's 3,600 impressions. So you give out $50 bottles of wine and think you're saving money. I win every time. I spend a little bit more on the front end, and I help our clients do the same thing, and they just dominate. Like, I literally have like the San Antonio Spurs sending me pictures 5 years later on, executives that are on like Thanksgiving, they're using the knives, saying, "Hey, thinking about you, John, using the knives." I win every time. Because we're not the biggest, we don't have the biggest budgets, but these 10 things we walk through, not only the item but the why. And so if it's helpful to your tribe, it maybe would be for them to at least have the list. They can go download it for free. If they go to thegiversedge.com, they can download the PDF of the 10 worst gifts to avoid giving. So at least as they're talking with their marketing team or their assistant, they can say, at least avoid these 10 things, and you'll be in the top 1% of gift givers just because you avoid those 10 things. I think it's one of the more helpful things that we offer and give to our clients.
I really, really appreciate you touching on that, and hopefully the listeners and the No Quit Tribe will definitely take a look at that free gift. But for me, the importance is when you give gifts, and I give a lot of gifts to my clients and potential clients, I always think that, you always try to do something that's good for them. And I think it's important that, you touch on is maybe just think about them differently. And like you said, I love the word impressions, and I love the top of mind component. And I think that's something that we can obviously take away from this interview, is the importance of, if you're going to do something for a client, a potential client, prospect, whatnot, family member, just think a little bit about, what type of impression you can make. And I think when I've given gift cards, and I've definitely fallen under that trap, is you never do it thinking, oh, this is not going to be. But now that you said that, I kind of realized, I'm like, wow, I was like, that's kind of interesting. It's like the aunt or uncle that, when you're a 16 or 17-year-old kid and you're going through, puberty and high school and college, and, you get, a wool sweater. It's kind of like, really? Like, is that what you think about me? A wool sweater. Awesome.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. They don't know me at all. They don't know what's important to me. They're not in tune. And so, yeah, it's frustrating as all get out to, we all want to be acknowledged. I don't care if you're a billionaire and you're Mark Cuban, or whether you're, $30,000 assistant. We're all human beings, and we want to be, recognized in a way that says, hey, I know you, I got you. And that's, gifting is one of those few things I think that people don't realize the power of when it comes to that sort of thing.
So I completely apologize. Full and fair disclosure. On Monday, you're going to have delivered to your hotel a wool sweater, a gift card, some alcohol, and some food that you're allergic to.
Well done. You hit the what is it? The cycle in baseball. You hit all four. Well done. Well played.
Now here's a trade-off to that too. Is you have to admit that if you did get a gift like that, although it's not a good gift, it would definitely stand out as well.
Oh, I mean, I've had people after podcasts that have sent me gift cards, and the podcast host, and I'm like, did we not have a 25-minute conversation about all of this? Like, I'm like, this is obviously on autopilot for you, and you didn't realize that you're sending the gift card to the guy who's the gift guy, saying this is the 10 worst gifts. Like, literally, it was a Starbucks gift card. I was like, wow. I was like, yeah, I'll never forget it. But that's it's not exactly the emotion and the emotional anchor that they're probably going for.
No, but I definitely don't think that I'll be sending that to you. So I wanted hold on a second, make sure my assistant doesn't do that. But I wanted to ask you, one of the things we speak about on almost every single show are either daily or morning rituals, and I was curious if you have either a daily or morning ritual that you swear by.
Yeah, I mean, my boy Hal. One of the ways that we got connected, Hal Elrod and John Broman, and a lot of the Cutco Mafia. I follow a version of the Miracle Morning, and so the idea of I always do exercise in the morning. I have a ritual when it comes to what I put into my body with water and lemon and protein and those sorts of things. If I'm home, I typically do sauna. That's one of my happy places. I'll do a stretch. I read the Bible. And get my day kind of started pouring into myself, because once the day gets going, I got 3 little girls and multiple businesses and clients and whatever else. Like, if I don't start my day well and get up and do those sorts of things, my day doesn't go well. So yeah, the way you start your day really, at least for me, and I think most people, really impacts things. So that's part of my core.
No, I think it's interesting that question leads to a lot of similarities, and I'm a big fan, obviously, of Hal's, and having Hal on the show in the past. His morning ritual is important, and I think that's one of the really neat parts about that question is, although similar people in different fields or similar fields, all do their own thing, the importance and the common theme over the last 3 months has been the importance of how you start your day. So I'm glad you touched on that. I want to switch lanes for a minute here, and I wanted to ask you, if you could go back and give the 20-year-old version of yourself only one piece of advice. Now, assuming the 20-year-old version would have listened, what would that advice be?
I would have I would have involved other people in the business sooner. I thought I had to do it all myself. If I was the business owner, I had to be good at finance. I had to be good at operations. I had to do it all. And I would have avoided a lot of grief if I would have brought a guy like Rod in right from the start and built things, to last and with strength and delegated right from the start some of those key pieces of info and leadership and delegated. But I think I was like, I got to have a bit, I need to build towards a big building. I kind of felt embarrassed. I only had one employee to start. And so I wish I would have been, I wish I would have involved other people sooner.
No, that's good advice. And then an interesting question for you is, if you could have dinner with anybody, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
I mean, if you're a Christian, you can't, it's hard to not say, Jesus, but I would say let's take that out of the equation. Well, that's the first person that comes to mind, and now I'm blanking on anybody else outside of that. You know what? My business partner is a massive fan of his favorite person is Ronald Reagan, and so I'd probably have dinner with him and bring Rod along as kind of a payback for him saving my business and really changing my life. So I would use it as an opportunity to give a gift to him.
That's awesome. I think of all the interviews, you are the one person that specifically referenced giving somebody a gift via that question. So I think that's awesome. And obviously it just speaks so much about, not only do you talk about giving and gifting and do you write a book about it that's been a bestseller, but obviously it's why you've been successful as your company. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
So one of the things we talk about on our show and with our company a lot is accountability. Now I was curious what the word accountability means to you.
Well, I think, for me, the idea of having somebody that is going to ask and check in and follow up on, what you said you're going to do. I think it's pretty basic. It's super powerful. I think that's one of the reasons why having a business partner, a lot of people are like, how do you have a 50-50 partner? Like, how do you get decisions made, or how do you get things done, or how do you agree on things? What happens if you disagree? But for me, he's the person that I know is going to ask the follow-up question related to my life, my marriage, he's one of my best friends. But on the business side, he's the guy that is writing things down and coming back a week later and saying, hey, we said we were going to do X, Y, and Z. And knowing that somebody's holding you accountable to those things means it's 100 times more likely to get done. And so I think that alone, that accountability for us has been really, really huge. But it's not rocket science, but it is powerful.
No, I definitely agree with that. And this is something I think is right up your alley with the whole giftology and gifting component but what does paying it forward mean to you?
I think that anybody that's on the planet, especially in the U.S., we live in one of the best countries on the planet. We're super blessed. And I think that whether you have a faith or not, the way the world's wired is that, when you reap what you sow, when you put, good things out into the world, over time, good things come back. It could be 10x, could be 100x. And so it's the idea that, we all have been given a lot. In different ways. Some it's monetary, some it's relational, some it's physical, whatever. And I think that paying it forward means, hey, recognizing and being grateful for what you have, and then sharing that with others. And what's interesting, it's like love or anything else. The more you give, the more it comes back. So in some ways, paying it forward is almost selfish, because it's going to come back to you oftentimes over time in even greater quantities. So, but yeah, the idea of paying it forward is receiving the blessing that God's given you and saying, hey, I'm going to share this with others and do it intentionally.
No, it's awesome. And I think it goes right up, obviously, your alley and what you believe and obviously how you are successful with your company. And again, your amazing book, Giftology. I wanted to ask you, we briefly spoke before, you have a course coming out, I believe this fall, and I wanted to know if you'd like to just tell our listeners about that and anything else you have coming out as well.
Yeah. We, what's interesting is I almost didn't write the book because I was like, I'm a farm boy. Why would anybody read what I'm going to talk about? Or when I started keynoting big events, I'm like, why would anybody care what I have to say? But the more that we saw people respond, when we spoke at Google and when we wrote the book, people were like, we want more. The book's great, this talk is great, but we need we want a system. We want somebody to walk with us through this process of how to do it on a consistent basis and how to actually make it add ROI to our business. And so, for people that necessarily may not be able to hire us to do all of their gifting for them, like we wanted kind of an intermediary step. And so we went to Danny Iney from Miracy and said, hey, is this a legitimate course? And they said, yeah, we think it is. Let's do a pilot. So we did a pilot last fall and had financial advisors and solopreneurs, and we even had an executive from the Pittsburgh Steelers on the pilot, and we sold it out. And it was like $1,500 a seat. And the feedback from it was awesome. Like, this is great. That people walked away with, a full baked relationship action plan of what they were going to give and who and why. And so we said, okay, I guess there's going to be a course here. So we're finishing up the videotaping of it this summer, and it'll launch this fall, but it'll be the Giftology, the full blown course, and it'll be 6 modules, 6 hours long, with homework. But people will literally walk away with, the thing that we would do for a client. They'll kind of go through the process digitally and be able to understand how we're using Giftology in our own business and for our clients. And so we're pretty excited to put it out to the world.
That's awesome. And I want to just touch on something that you said, because I think it's really important, is a lot of people in businesses look at their bottom number and say, okay, this is how I need to make money. And you just said something that was really interesting, is not everybody can afford you, meaning to use your company. And that is something that I don't think enough people touch on, is that some of our products and services that we offer can't be obtained by everybody. Meaning, if I'm a startup, I can't afford to pay your company thousands of dollars or multiples of thousands to that level initially. But the fact that you have this course that you're offering, I think, is amazing. And again, it goes back to the concept of paying it forward. And I just think it's amazing because, as you said, is what you put out there comes back to you, and it might be 10x. And maybe it's not directly to you. Maybe it's to your wife or to your spouse or to your kids or a coworker. But I think it's awesome that you touch on that. And I wanted to ask you, before we let you go, if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners.
I would just say, if you do buy into this concept, don't let it be a shiny object for a month or two. Commit to it for at least 3 years. And I challenge you to go be radically generous with people, to give more than is reasonable, to love on people strategically, and to put this into practice in your business and personal life. Come back to me 3 years after going all in on the concept, whatever that means for you. And I challenge you to come back and say that wasn't worth it, that my business didn't grow as a result of it, that my relationships didn't thrive as a result of it, that if you are going to do it, don't dip your toe in the water. Go all in for 3 years. And I look forward to talking to you and seeing the growth and the amazing things that happen as a result of it.
No, that's awesome. And then last question is, for our listeners that want to connect with you, follow you, or check out your program coming out in the fall, what's the best way for them to do that?
I mean, I would say, they're able to sign up at the Giver's Edge. thegiversedge.com would probably be the best place. I mean, they can go check us out and, buy the book on Amazon, all kind of stuff. But I would recommend getting the free download and starting there. And then, obviously if you Google Giftology or John Ruhlin or whatever else, there's a bunch of other places. But I would say start there first. That's awesome. I appreciate it. And last time, if you could just share that free download with the 10 worst gifts again. Yeah, thegiversedge.com and get the free download. Awesome. Well, listen, John, I truly, truly appreciate not only your time, but also what you shared with us today. And again, to our listeners, if you have not heard of John or checked out his book or listened to any of his things, I would definitely recommend, first of all, checking out his book, whether that's you buy it on actual physical book or buy the download. It's something that if you're in any business, or even if you're a good person and you ever give gifts, definitely check it out. And I really appreciate you spending some time with us today. Thanks for having me, Chris. Thank you for listening to episode number 128. Today, John Ruhlin shared his perspective on the importance of paying it forward, but also paying it forward 100% for the other person. John explained how giving the right gift and being truly thoughtful can have hundreds of positive impressions for the recipient. He also described the true importance of making investments in both your clients and their families with no strings attached. In his closing remarks, John pointed out a few key points. He shared that paying it forward to and for others is also somewhat selfish, as a good deed done well typically comes back to you at some point in the future. John inspired us to be radically generous, but to also give it 3 years. He referenced not just dipping our toe in the water,
when it comes to being generous. John suggested that we go all in. So in closing, as we are continuing with this Pay It Forward movement, when is the last time you really and truly thanked someone with a unique and special gift? Not a generic thank you card from a set of 24 or a $5 Starbucks card. When is the last time you really and truly both said and showed your appreciation for somebody else? I challenge you today to be different, to be unique, and as John said, we all love to be acknowledged and appreciated. So do just that for somebody else today. Doesn't have to be expensive or extravagant, but it does, and it should be meaningful. Thank someone, show your gratitude, and pay it forward as you go for your greatness. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.